I'll call the meeting of the Common Council for Tuesday, December 21st to order. We are having difficulty with our computers, so we will do this the old-fashioned way. Will you call the roll then?
Fire.
Here.
Paschal.
Here.
Rosendich.
Here.
Varsho.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Witzel.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Spiros.
Here.
Butke. Henler.
Here.
The next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I don't know.
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item C is the public comment period. At this time, the council president will recognize members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the council president, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. Council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak tonight? Any members of the public? On for a third time, seeing none, we'll move on to item D, approval of the minutes of the December 14th, 2021 regular meeting. Motion by Mr. Fisher to approve and a second by Mr. Butke. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, we have to do all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Item E is staff updates. Mr. Barg has one.
Thank you. Earlier tonight, really just a few minutes ago, actually, the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee recommended approval of a contract with the new assessor, and that is Forward Appraisal out of Green Bay. And we have Steve Shepro and Beth with him, who works with him. And even though the contract is not officially approved until the contract is blessed as part of the consent agenda by this body, I thought it'd be an opportunity to put a face and a name to this body and to those people who see these meetings on TV and our other platforms. So I thought I'd just ask Steve just to come up and introduce himself real briefly, and so that we all know who it is we're going to be working with, and Beth as well. Come up, thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Steve here in the council. Looking forward to the job going forward here in the assessor's office. I don't know if many of you know this. I've worked in the city for quite a while. I worked with one of the previous assessors, Joan Spencer, doing commercials for Bomar and then for myself with her. So I've been quite familiar with it. We're out running around looking at different properties already tonight. So I think it'll be pretty easy going and easy fit to move into. So, but if anybody had any questions, like I said, my company is out of Green Bay. That's where I originally started as I did the commercials I still do for Green Bay. But I do have individuals working there. I live over here in Plover right now. And we do Point and Rapids also. So it's nice that, especially with the software we use, we have a lot of similar properties that we can work with, and it will help us down the line, defending values and working with the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome aboard.
Okay. No questions?
Anyone have questions? I don't see any.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Item F is council president's comments. I have a couple tonight. The first one makes me feel old. Employee recognitions, Matthew Barris and Caleb Bornbach both started with the police department on 12/27 of 2006, and it seems impossible that they've been here for 15 years. The second item I have tonight is I want to recognize the life of a former city employee who passed away last week. Steve Lou served the city as a police officer for 29 years. He was a good cop, a better friend. But what he really excelled at was being a husband, father, and grandfather. He'll be missed. And third, on a happier note, I want to say happy holidays to all the citizens and visitors to Marshfield. Item G is council comments. Are there any council comments tonight? Item H is reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any reports tonight? Item I is the consent agenda. You have that before you. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Hendler to approve, second by Mr. Butke. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? We have to
We have
read,
to read the minutes.
we have to read some minutes for some meetings that occurred earlier tonight, and Ms. Hall will take care of that.
Okay, I'll do two of them.
Okay,
The Judiciary and License Committee minutes of December 21st, 2021. The meeting was called to order by Vice Chairperson Paschal at 4:45 PM in the Common Council Chambers, City Hall. Present were Alderpersons Paschal, Spiros, and Witzel. Excused Alderperson Wagner. Also present Alderperson Hendler and Fisher, Pat Zeps, and Deb Hall. There were no citizen comments. Motion by Witzel, second by Spiros, to approve the minutes of the December 7th, 2021 meeting. Motion carried. Motion by Witzel, second by Spiros, to approve the following consent agenda items. Secondhand article dealer licenses to Eco ATM at 641 South Central Avenue and Ultracom Wireless at 911 North Central Avenue. Secondhand jewelry license to Christensen Jewelers, 1823 North Central Avenue, and Jewelers Palette, 242 South Central Avenue. A secondhand jewelry, secondhand article dealer license to Iggy's Auction House at 206 East Depot Street. And an auto salvage dealer, scrap metal dealer license to Asylum Scrap Services at 2304 South Galvin Avenue. Motion carried. There were no future agenda items, and there being no further business, the vice chair adjourned the meeting at 4:48 PM. Motion carried. Then we have the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee minutes of December 21st, 2021. The meeting was called to order by City Clerk Hall at 5:00 PM in the Common Council Chambers, City Hall. Present were Alderpersons Witzel, Paschal, Wagner, Hendler, and Spiros. Also present were Alderpersons Fisher, Fire, Butke, City Administrator Barg, and City Personnel. The clerk asked for nominations for an acting chairperson for this meeting. Alderperson Hendler nominated Alderperson Witzel for acting chairperson. There being no further nominations, the clerk declared the nominations closed. Motion by Paschal, second by Hendler, to elect Alderperson Witzel as acting chairperson. Motion carried. Alderperson Witzel assumed the chair. There were no potential conflicts of interest, and there were no citizen comments. Motion by Wagner, second by Hendler, to approve the items on the consent agenda. 1, minutes of the December 7th, 2021 meeting, and 2, bills in the amount of $916,573.51. Motion carried. No items were removed from the consent agenda. Motion by Paschal, second by Spiros, to recommend council approval of an agreement for property assessment services with Forward Appraisal. Motion carried. Motion by Paschal, second by Hendler, to recommend council approval of budget resolution number 7, 2021, transferring $6,685 from the contingency account to the capital projects buildings account for the purchase and installation of a display cabinet for posting agendas in front of City Hall. Motion carried. Motion by Hendler, second by Paschal, to recommend council approval of resolution number 2021-65, 2022 ambulance rates. Motion carried. Motion by Paschal, second by Spiros, to recommend council approval of the 2022 insurance policy renewals. Motion carried. Motion by Wagner, second by Hendler, to recommend council approval to refill the vacant Administrative Associate 3 position in the Street Division. Motion carried. Motion by Paschal, second by Spiros, to recommend council approval of appointing Mitch Naspish and Joel Goham as acting assistant wastewater superintendents effective January 10th, 2022. Motion carried. Motion by Wagner, second by Paschal, to recommend council approval of placement of the communication specialist position in pay grade 123 and to authorize staff to refill this vacant position. Motion carried. The Communications Director revised job description was reviewed by McGrath Human Resources Group for compensation analysis. There were some slight adjustments to the position, but those adjustments were not substantial enough for a pay grade change. Motion by Paschal, second by Wagner, to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.851C, concerning employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The committee reviewed the compensation benefit adjustments for specific police department employees. We did not talk about the 3-year agreement with the police officer bargaining unit. It will be discussed at the common council meeting. Roll call vote, all ayes, time 5:33 p.m., motion carried. Present in closed session were Alderpersons Paschal, Wetzel, Hendler, Wagner, Spiros, Fisher, Fire, and Bucky, City Administrator Barg, and city staff. Motion by Paschal, second by Hendler, to return to open session. Roll call vote, all ayes. Time 5:47 p.m., motion carried. Motion by Paschal, second by Hendler, to direct staff to finalize the memo of agreement with the police officers bargaining unit and implement subsequent changes, motion carried. There were no future agenda items. There being no further business, the chair adjourned the meeting at 5:49 p.m., motion carried.
Thank you. And Mr. Knack is here to read the Public Works meeting minutes.
Thank you. That meeting was called to order this evening at 5:52 p.m. in these chambers by Chairman Butke. Present were Alderman Butke, Fisher, Rosendich, Varsho, and Fire of the Board of Public Works. Also city staff and also everybody else in this room was here. There was a motion by Fire, second by Rosendich, to recommend approval of the minutes of the December 6th, 2021 Board of Public Works meeting. That motion carried. There were no citizen comments. There was a motion by Varsho, second by Fire, to recommend approval of placement of a historic marker in the West Park Street right-of-way, just west of Pine Avenue. That motion carried. There was a motion by Fire, second by Rosendich, to recommend approval of the purchase of a John Deere 190 wheeled excavator from Brooks Tractor of Plover, Wisconsin, in the amount of $210,000, and to authorize execution of a purchase order. There were no items recommended for future agendas. There was a motion by Rosendich, second by Varsho, that the meeting be adjourned at 5:57 p.m.
Thank you. Now I will ask if there are any items from those agendas or the consent agenda that need discussion or removal. Mr. Bucky? Okay. Oh, I already have a motion. I already have a motion to approve. Mr. Wagner, did you have something or?
No, sir.
Okay. Seeing no items to be discussed, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Mr. Wagner's.
Mr. Wagner, were you opposed or were you in favor?
No. I was in favor.
Yeah.
By the way, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just delayed. That's why we're questioning.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Item K is, that motion carries, did I mention that? Okay. Item K is a request to approve budget resolution number 07-2021, transferring $6,685 from account number 101-51412-05-57350, the contingency fund, to account number 405-57650-64-58830, the capital projects buildings account, for the purchase and installation of a display cabinet for posting agendas in front of the city hall, presented by Steve Barg, city administrator.
Thank you, Council President. I just handed out something that I handed out during the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting, and I apologize it wasn't in the packet. That's my error. And that's a picture of what this display cabinet would look like. and where it would be, which is on the right-hand side as you walk toward City Hall door, would be just to your right, where shown. This came out of a staff discussion about the issue of posting agendas and other city notices in a way that's seen best by the public. We do this in various places, but what we have here in City Hall is a monitor. When you walk through the front set of doors on your right, and it scrolls and it has all the various agendas and other announcements. But if you want to come and check those out on off hours, say nights or weekends, you'd be unable really to peek in and effectively see that monitor. So we wanted to put a board outside to be more accessible to people who check these things off hours. I know we are on the website. They could find it online and other places, but some people like to look in person. And we thought it would be a good idea to put a good quality display case out there that had this type of information. So we looked at it and we wanted to make it lit. So this would be backlit, what you're looking at on that picture. And it would have the notices. It'd be incumbent upon staff, as we talked about at the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting, to swap out to make sure it's current, that old agendas are taken down and new agendas and other information are posted. But we think this would be an effective way to communicate. It was stated earlier in the last meeting, couldn't we do this electronically and have that type of board? The main reason we didn't do this, we talked about this, but cost is the main issue. There's also the issue of the scrolling electronics and the hard to read nature of that, as opposed to actually having a chance to look at one agenda, focus on, I'm interested in the Plan Commission, or I'm interested in the Board of Public Works agenda, and not wanting to see the whole thing cycle in front of you. So for those two reasons in particular, we felt it was best to go with the type of board that we're proposing. We're asking for the funding source to be contingency. We have not used any of the $35,000 so far set aside in contingency in the adopted 2021 budget. We have, however, through a resolution, the continuing appropriations resolution we do every year, committed $23,500 from that amount toward the replacement of a boiler in this building, something that Dan Kinect had brought forward recently. But that still would leave enough room for this expense of $66,885 and then an additional $5,000. So we'd still be within the budgetary limits. The idea is to order it now and make the purchase with Stratford sign, and that way they can construct it and be ready to install it in the spring for us. So with that, I would take any questions, but otherwise I would recommend approval of Budget Resolution 07-2021 for the purchase and installation of this display case from Stratford Sign.
Mr. Fisher? Mr. Fisher has a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was the price for the digital? You had mentioned an electronic option. What was the price?
I don't remember the exact, if we even got an exact cost on that. We just, based upon some, I think Tom had done some looking, Tom Laux, and presented perhaps the fact that it was well over $6,000. That wasn't, again, the sole reason why we looked away from it, but that was certainly a big reason, that it was more expensive than the type of board you're looking at tonight.
But we don't know how much.
Again, it's awkward with Tom in the other room, but I think at one point he did have an estimate, but I believe it was a fair amount more than $6,600.
All right.
And as I mentioned, the other thing with the scrolling, even though some people might think a board of this nature is kind of old school, where you look at maybe 8 agendas tacked up or put up on a surface, it is easier for a person coming then to watch some of the stuff that goes on in the monitor that we have here inside City Hall.
Thank you. I just follow up. I would like to request in the future that we at least know what the other option, what the amount for the other option would be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Wagner? Okay, signaling no. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Witzel to approve. Second by Mr. Hendler. Any further discussion? See none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed.
Mr. Fisher is opposed. And that motion carries.
Thank you.
Item L is a request for input related to the 2023 to 2027 Capital Improvement Program update, presented by Dan Kinect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Thank you. Just after the first of the year, we will start our next round of CIP update for the 2023 to 2027 5-year window. A few years back, we revised our policy to insert a step on the front side of this to give the council an opportunity to provide input on upcoming priorities or areas of interest that should be considered during the CIP process. So what I have for you tonight is just a high-level look back at the 2021 projects and what the status of those projects is. A list of the 2022 projects that have been funded in the 2022 budget. And then we've included in the packet a list of all the projects in the 5-year window from 2022 to 2026. Now, we're not going to go through the entire list tonight, but I just want to point out what's in front of you and then give you the opportunity to provide any input as we start into that process. As I mentioned, the first list of projects is the 2021 capital projects that have been worked on throughout the course of this past year. And on that list, we've got just a brief status as either a completed project, an ongoing multi-year project, or a delayed project. And there are 25 completed projects, 14 that are ongoing or multi-year projects, and there were 12 projects that were delayed for various reasons. On the list of 2022 projects, those that made the 2022 budget, actually, all the projects that were in the capital improvement plan made the 2022 budget, with the exception of one project, and that was funding for new laptops for council members was pulled out at budget time. Otherwise, that list made it from the capital improvement plan into the adopted budget. And then, of course, I mentioned the full list of all the projects in the next 5 years. Tonight, my intent is not to go through them in detail, but just to give you an opportunity to review those. And if you have any thoughts or recommendations on priorities, changes in the current plan, or things that should be added in the 5th year, you can let us know. Don't need that information tonight. As I mentioned, the process will kick off after the 1st of the year, but if you have thoughts on priorities that you'd like to see staff look at, you can reach out to me anytime during the coming weeks, and we can add those into our review process. I would also take this opportunity to mention that staff is working on a list of potential projects for the ARPA funding. We would like to bring that list of possible projects to the council sometime during the 1st quarter here of 2022, and then eventually incorporate that list into our CIP plan as well. So we have a complete look at our 5-year project list. So again, I'll take any questions tonight. If you have priorities you'd like to share tonight, I'd be happy to listen. Otherwise, you can reach out to me anytime in the coming weeks and share any thoughts or priorities on capital projects as we move forward.
Does anyone have any input for Dan tonight? Mr. Budke.
Thank you. And does the money that we're looking at getting, that money from the government, can that be used for street projects?
There's a couple categories of the projects. One is for lost revenue. I think Ron has reported that in the past. I think we have close to $1 million that is in the lost revenue category, and that can be used for almost any type of project. So street projects would be eligible in that category. There are also specific projects that are targeted within the funding that have less flexibility, but we have a list of projects that might fall into that category as well. So we've developed a pretty strong list, and then we'll make some recommendations to the council, but ultimately look for your direction on where to focus those dollars.
Yeah, at Public Works, we talked about, Mr. Turchi brought it up about 17th Street, for example, and I agree with what he's trying to do there, but that might be an option as well.
Yeah, we have that one on our list. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other input for Dan tonight?
Thank you.
Item M is a request by Councilmember Fisher to review, discuss broadcasting all city commission, board, and committee meetings, introduced by Steve Barg, City Administrator, and presented by Adam Fisher, Councilmember for District 7.
Thank you. What I intend to do is to give a sort of a response to what Mr. Fisher brought up at the last meeting. If you remember, at the end of the meeting, he was asking what we put on the cable channel and the other broadcast platforms that we have, and why we don't do more, if not all, of our meetings. So just a little synopsis. from staff's point of view, we have talked about this a little bit and reviewed it. We have, in addition to the council, we have 24 commissions, boards, and committees. About a third of those do not meet regularly. They meet as needed, like the zoning board of appeals or the board of review or some of those types of groups that meet on a very periodic basis. That means the other 2/3 roughly meet regularly, such as monthly. The ones that are being put on cable TV and our other platforms right now, there are 4 in addition to the council. It's the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, the Board of Public Works, the Plan Commission, and the Fire and Police Commission. And those are all monthly meetings. In fact, Finance and Board of Public Works are twice a month. The remainder are not broadcast at all. There were 2 others, the Utilities Commission and the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Committee, that were being covered previously by our former cable coordinator before Tom Laux and the Communications Department was started here. We have not been doing it since that time. The questions we have, it's certainly this body's purview, what they want to see covered, broadcast, and put out there to the people. And we want to be as transparent as possible. I do want to remind people, though, that sometimes we talk about transparency. The fact of the matter is all our meetings are open to the public. They're all published and posted in places where people know where they are, when they are. So we're certainly not trying to limit public input or feedback. But as far as the idea of broadcasting, the concerns we would have about extensive coverage of more committees, boards, and commissions, number one is staff and resources. Right now, Tom Laux is all by himself. Hopefully, we're going to get an assistant for him, a communications specialist in the next couple of months. But even when that happens, there'll only be 2 people in that department, and their staffing and resources get kind of pulled rather thin at times. So if you start looking at going from 4 committees to 24 committees that you might want to cover, that's going to be an issue. Another thing is the fact that many of these bodies don't have formal authority. All they can really do is recommend up through the ranks through one of our council subcommittees and ultimately the council to get things approved. They are advisory in nature. And the third thing is that I think the perceived viewership, and maybe this is incorrect, but it's our perception that of some of these groups, given what they do and what their agendas are about, probably would be fairly low in comparison with things like the council's main subcommittees and the Plan Commission. So we're certainly open to whatever this body wants to look at doing, but those are some of the thoughts we have in terms of why we wouldn't want to see a lot more extensive coverage, because it really would pull the resources rather thin, we think, for maybe limited value. But at this point, I want to turn it over to Councilmember Fisher, who brought this up, and any council discussion that you may have.
Thank you, Council President. So I was out in public when a citizen came to me and pretty firmly told me, and I didn't know this, that certain meetings were being filmed at one time, and now they're no longer being filmed. And they essentially questioned the transparency of the city and why we were not doing that. And one of the biggest concerns was the Utility Commission, and they kept bringing up the Utility Commission because the Utility Commission did seek the construction of a new building, and they wanted to know why those meetings were not being filmed and aired on public access. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up here. I personally don't feel that we need to film all committees. My question, though, that I would be asking is, should we take a look at some of the more active boards and commissions? So Utility Commission obviously meets monthly. Economic Development Board meets monthly. Should those boards or committee, or should those boards and commissions, have a higher priority and be filmed so that citizens here in Marshfield do believe that we are being fully transparent? Now, I understand the idea of resources and the limited resources, but I don't think we need to go straight to 24. But are we talking about 2 to 3 more meetings a month that can be filmed so that people are regaining trust that that their city government is listening to them and is seeking to be transparent and airing these meetings?
Well, if I can respond to that, I think you're asking the right questions. I'm glad to hear you say that in your mind, the idea of going to all the committee would be maybe excessive. And that if you are looking at maybe adding to the list of what we cover, that probably the most significant ones to consider would be the bodies that have independent authority. that can actually take actions, even apart from the council needing to ratify, as opposed to ones that, like I said, have very little authority and are meeting to advise others about their thoughts and perspectives.
Yes.
Thank you, Council President. I guess what I'd like to do is, I'd like to see the Utility Commission, Economic Development Board, start with those two committees. And so I will make this a motion that we, and my motion will be that we start filming those committees once we have a new communications specialist hired and trained. So I'd like to, after that person is hired and trained, to add those two meetings to the roster.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Fisher and a second, I believe, from Mr. Witzel.
Yes,
And Mr. Witzel, your comment.
thank you. It's interesting, the ones that we're filming, I believe, are all located here.
Not PFC,
Okay.
that's at the fire
Yeah,
station,
that's
but
right.
the others
PFC
are.
is off-site.
And actually, if I can jump in for a second, that is one of the other things I wanted to mention. I apologize, Tom, is one of the concerns is if we went to all the meetings, a number of those are at remote locations that are, a little more challenging to cover for our staff.
And that was gonna be my question. We're looking at potentially adding utility and EDB, and I fully agree. I find it interesting that when you preface this, you mentioned that the majority of the committees take advisory action and it's always approved by the council, but very clearly utility does their own thing. I mean, even as a council member sitting on that commission, I sit there, I have no vote. So they're really definitely autonomous. So I would agree that there are certain committees that maybe need to be available for the general public a little bit more easily. But my question was gonna be, do we have the equipment? Do we have the availability? And I think we need to look at that. The fact that we're doing the Police and Fire Commission remotely makes me more confident that we have what we need. And so I'm gonna be looking forward to what transpires once we hire the new specialist.
Well, in that case too, Tom Laux used to be there in person, and now he's got cameras set up in that fire training room where he can do it remotely without actually having to go to the fire station on those Wednesday mornings. I don't know if that would be an option with any other remote locations, or if it would require actually in-person filming.
Thank you.
Was there someone over here, Mr. Rosendich?
Thank you. Well, my question is, when you say filming, are you asking it to be live as well? So just not film it and broadcast it later, live is what you're live streaming it?
That is another possibility, to cover meetings and just to replay rather than real time.
My question was because Mr. Fisher had said filming. I just want to clarify, we're talking streaming live.
I do want to, thank you for saying that. When you said live, I misunderstood you. No, I'm not necessarily saying live, like I don't want to live stream it on necessarily Facebook. I don't know how public access honestly works. I don't know if, I assume we're live now on public access, but I could be wrong. I don't know. But I just see they're filming the meetings, however they're currently doing it. With public access, they would do it the same way.
Any further comments or questions? Mr. Wagner?
Yes, sir. There are 2 points I want to make. Number one is the committees that, or the commissions that have independent authority from the council are the ones that need the transparency the most. So the 2 top ones on the list are Utility Commission and the Fire and Police Commission. That's what I think, that one is a high priority. Those 2 are a high priority, I believe. Secondly, live is not necessarily a big deal, but for the citizens to be able to look back and see what caused what decision, or who was making what decision, and what the rationale for that decision was, is the important thing. That we have a video record of it is important. I wish Mr. Fisher was asking for Fire and Police Commission and utility, but I'll go along with this as a first stop.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The Fire and Police Commission is already filmed.
Correct.
So what I'm asking for is just now
Okay.
the Utility Commission as the second commission. And then I just feel with the Economic Development Board's scope that, and just being a meeting on its frequency, I think it would make a logical next step to add that.
Yeah, I didn't realize the Fire and Police Commission was back in the mix. I remember there had been some controversy over it over the previous few years, let's put it that way.
Yeah, they were doing it by Zoom a lot during the pandemic, but they've always been covered and they're continuing to do so now live, in person.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion to, can you read back the motion, please?
The motion is to start filming the Marshfield Utility Commission and Economic Development Board meetings once the communication specialist is hired.
Mr.
And
Witzel.
trained.
What's that?
And train.
And trained.
I think a roll call vote would be appropriate on this.
Are you ready for the vote?
Yes.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Varsho,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes,
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Spiros,
yes,
Budke,
Yes.
Hendler.
And that motion carries.
Thank you.
Item N is a request to appoint Wayne Schultz of 1609 West Fifth Street to the Fire and Police Commission to complete a vacant term ending in 2024, presented by me. Mr. Schultz is a retired deputy from the Wood County Sheriff's Department and has previously served on the Fair Board. He's here tonight to introduce himself, so Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. Yes, I've been involved for many years on the Fair Board. I've worked with quite a number of people that sit on this council as president of the Fair Board and as well as just a Fair Board member through the years. In law enforcement, I worked 3 years at Marshfield PD starting in 1985. And my capacity there was as a police dispatcher. I got hired by Wood County in 1988 and I retired in 2015. I, as a deputy, went up through the ranks and did a lot of budgetary things I was in charge of our snowmobile patrol. I was also in charge of our seasonal weight enforcement program. So I had my own budget for those items and had to file reports and schedule people and that sort of thing. I also was a field training officer for many years. And on that capacity or in that capacity, I did background investigations on people who were applying to be hired. I did interviews, sat in on the hiring interviews, and whittled down the candidates down to the person that we felt was best suited for the role. So I've had quite a bit of experience in doing the types of things that the Fire and Police Commission are tasked with. I've also done fire investigations the last 8 years of my career. So I've got quite a bit of experience with dealing on the fire side as well. So it's not all law enforcement. And I appreciate Council President Nick Paschal considering me for this position. And I thank you all for your consideration in this.
Thank you, Wayne. I'd like to remind everyone that the recommended action is none at this time unless the rules are suspended, and final action will be scheduled for the January 11th meeting. I don't think we need to suspend the rules at this point, but I would remind everyone on the council that the Fire and Police Commission has several important decisions to make in the next few weeks, and they're working shorthanded. And I know that they would appreciate someone filling that position. Item O is to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.85, parent E, 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically the development agreement and project located in TIF District number 13, and a closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 1985, parent 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employees over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, specifically a new 3-year agreement with the Marshfield Police Officer Bargaining Unit. And a closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.85, paragraph 1G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, specifically an update on litigation involving the Marshfield Clinic real estate tax claim. Motion go into closed session. Motion by Mr. Bucky, second by Mr. Fisher. Roll call vote, please.
Fire.
Yes.
Paschal.
Yes.
Rosendich.
Yes.
Varsho.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Witzel.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Spiros.
Yes.
Budke.
Yes.
And Handler.
Yes.
We're
My microphone was on.
Okay. And we have some action to take in open session on those. We will start with the police officer contract. I see a motion somewhere. I'm looking for a motion to approve the police officer contract. Mr. Rosendich, and a second by Brian. Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
No one's opposed, so that motion carries. Now we will go to the other item. Deb, do you want to read back what the suggested wording was on that motion?
I knew you were gonna do that. And happy you can correct me. So to make the city attorney as the appearance of record as counsel in the litigation against the Marshfield Clinic. And
Further defined by real estate.
So
Okay.
let's just say, a motion to, direct the city attorney to make an appearance of record in the litigation with the clinic as co-counsel.
Mr. Wagner?
So moved.
Mr. Wagner made the motion, Mrs. Spiro seconded it. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, that motion passes with one abstention. Item R is suggested items for future agendas. Sometime in January. Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Mr. Rosendich got his hand up in a hurry. In a second? Mr. Barshall seconded that. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Merry
Aye.
Christmas.